Welcome to Empowered by Iron, the podcast for female strength athletes by female strength athletes. We are your hosts, Dr. Kristen Lander from Fiercely Fuel Nutrition Coaching and Dr. Mary Morton, scientist and weightlifter. Together, we are Empowered by Iron. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Female Strength Academy. Or are we Empowered by Iron?
We're both.
Was that a good infomercial? So you guys probably noticed a week or two ago, we had a name swap. We are now
on
Female Strength.
Instagram.
Yeah. We are now Female Strength Academy, but Empowered by Iron didn't go anywhere. Empowered by Iron is still there. It's under Female Strength Academy. It has its own separate Instagram page, but Empowered by Iron is Female Strength Academy. Female Strength Academy is Empowered by Iron. We are the same people. It's Kristen and I running both. So no one's left in the rain. It's the two of us. So if you are talking to Female Strength Academy, you are talking to us. If you're talking to Empowered by Iron, you're talking to us. And if you were wondering why you're not following Empowered by Iron, it's because you're probably not. So go find Empowered by Iron. Follow that page on Instagram so you make sure that you don't miss any of the episode updates.
Right. So Female Strength Academy is our new parent company because we are more than just a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And so Empowered by Iron, the podcast, still exists, still awesome as ever. But now we have a platform to grow bigger and get you guys more resources and more information.
Yep. So go give Empowered by Iron on Instagram a follow. And with that, let's jump into today's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Empowered by Iron. This week, we are going to be talking all about hypertrophy. What is it? Why do we do it? How do we do it? Who is it for? Who is it best for? We're going to break it down based on research, based on textbooks. And we also have a question from our Patreon that we are going to answer as well. So if you aren't already supporting us on Patreon, one of the perks of being one of our Patreon supporters is you get an update on when we're going to be recording and what topics we'll be recording. And you can actually ask questions ahead of time to make sure that your question gets answered on the podcast. Yep. So that link is in the description as always. If you want, you don't have to, but the support from Patreon helps us continue to do the podcast. So we are talking about hypertrophy.
Mm-hmm.
Such a big word that we hear used and misused all the time.
Yeah. I think in the strength world too, a lot of people don't really know necessarily what hypertrophy is, or like maybe a coach had them on a hypertrophy program, but they don't even necessarily really know why. So we're going to break it all down.
We are going to break it all down.
And there's a difference. So there's a distinct difference between training for strength.
Yes.
And training for hypertrophy, which is muscle size, which we'll get into.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us the difference.
So there are essentially two main types of training. There's training for strength, which is high resistance. You're getting near maximal muscle concentrations for a small number of repetitions with full recovery in between sets. So think about your typical powerlifter,
right,
taking like 5-minute rests. Like that's what you want.
Yep.
The second one is hypertrophy, which most of us have done some type of hypertrophy cycle. If you follow Female Strength Academy and you've downloaded the 10-week strength program, 100% free, you are in the middle of a hypertrophy cycle right now.
Yep.
And so that includes moderate loads, high volume with short to moderate rests that allow for the athlete to perform more repetitions than is typical of a strength training program. This means anywhere from 6 to 12 reps, or as we'll get into later, really the best is 8 to 12 reps. Right. But it's heavy enough loads to elicit a concentric or eccentric contraction failure. So you're getting to rep 11 and you dying.
Yeah, you're getting to rep 11 and maybe you're not going to get number 12.
Mm-hmm. And the other part that I think is crucial is during hypertrophy, rest periods are short so that the muscles are not fully recovered before the next set begins. You're trying to basically train your muscles to failure.
Right.
Yeah. Think about trying to run a mile. So when you're training your body to run a mile, you go as far as you can physically go, and then you have to stop because you can't go anymore. But over time, you're able to run that mile, that 2 miles. So the hypertrophy training is very similar in that you're learning to do 3x12. Then you're learning to do 3x12 at a little higher weight and a little higher weight. So you're just training your muscles over time.
Right. Whereas in a strength cycle, usually most of us, we aren't training to failure, right? Usually most of our coaches are like, don't be failing any reps. If you're failing any reps, then we need to modify the program.
Mm-hmm.
So big difference there, because in hypertrophy, you really often are training to failure or near failure.
Yes, but in strength, you should be able to hit everything unless you're getting up to like 95 and above percent.
Right.
Then sometimes that variable is depending on the day.
Right.
But really, strength training, you shouldn't be missing anything.
Right.
So those of you who decide to one max rep all the time, the fuck are you doing? Stop it.
Yeah, don't max out every day. You're not helping anything.
No.
You're definitely not getting stronger.
No.
Probably just getting frustrated with yourself because you're going to start missing lifts you shouldn't miss.
Yeah.
Don't ask me how I know.
No, Kristen wouldn't know.
I would never do that.
Never, ever. Not even last week.
Did not do that. I have not done that in years. But I used to do that. But, I mean, so I tested an opener when I wasn't supposed to. Oh, my God. Everyone's going to give me shit about that.
Okay.
Okay, but you thought it was a good idea, too.
I for sure did.
Okay.
Mainly because it was a mental thing for me. Because I know for me, personally, like, if I can't hit my opener, if I feel that I can't, like, it's over.
Right. So, just a little background. I was not supposed to be testing openers for my meet, but I got a little panicked. She knows all about it. I told on myself. I got a little panicked. I tested my squat opener and then I failed it. And then I had to text her and say, I made a mistake and I think I wasn't supposed to do this and I'm really sorry. So we had a big long chat about it. Everything's fine. It's fine.
We're fine.
It's fine.
And now she's in a hypertrophy cycle.
I'm not.
You're not?
Mm-mm.
Oh, that's true. You're right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. But let's talk about what hypertrophy is. Okay. So we all use this word. Hypertrophy literally means like making muscle fibers bigger. So it's the result of individual muscle fibers experiencing the mechanical loading from training, and they increase in volume. So they increase in size. So you're not actually adding new muscle cells or new muscle fibers. You're just increasing the size of what's already there. So sometimes some people think of it as like a thickening of those fibers that are already there.
The thickening.
Yes. And so this occurs when the body has been stressed just the right amount. Your body responds to the stress and the load that's being placed on with a cellular response that leads to the synthesis of more cell material, basically.
Right. So you're getting bigger in size.
Right. So there's two things that have to occur for muscle fibers to grow in size. So one, they have to be stimulated.
So
through
lifting.
Training. Yeah. So you have these things that are called dormant cells that are called satellite cells. They become activated due to trauma, damage, injury. It's a way for your body to repair itself. So those are all things that occur during weight training. You guys all know that you're damaging your muscles so that they stimulate to grow.
Right.
That's what training is. The second thing that has to happen is repair.
Correct.
This is why people will say rest days is when your body's actually like your muscles are growing. And it's true. The immune system response gets triggered. It leads to inflammation and then the natural cleanup and repair process that occurs on a cellular level. So both things have to happen.
Correct.
Yeah. So rest is super important. And then along with that is a hormonal response that gets triggered from training. So it causes a release of hormones that help regulate cell activity. So growth factor, which helps stimulate muscle hypertrophy, cortisol, which is our stress hormone, and testosterone, which increases protein synthesis. So those satellite cells then multiply and migrate to the damaged tissue, and they fuse with the skeletal muscle and donate their nuclei to the muscle fibers and help them thicken and grow.
Because you guys know that muscle fibers are multinucleated cells. Muscle cells are multinucleated.
they might not know that and they might not care, but we get really excited about that.
So usually one cell has one nucleus, but different cells in your body, including muscle cells, can be multinucleated, which means they carry multiple little brains in their own bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So these have multiple brains.
So that means that the bigger your muscles, the more your brains?
I think the net brain that you have is overall, yes. You have bigger net brain.
So anyway, basically in plain English, that means that you're growing larger muscle with an improved tolerance to larger loads.
Right.
That's what hypertrophy is. That's what growing muscles is.
So the bigger the muscle, in theory, the bigger the strength gains?
In theory. So the prevailing theory with hypertrophy, so you guys need to understand, and you've probably figured this out just by listening to us, is that in science, not everything is figured out. Like, we think we know things, and there will be prevailing theories, but sometimes those theories are proven wrong.
Right. Like, gravity is technically a theory, the theory of gravity. We can't argue that gravity is not a thing, but it's a theory.
It's a theory. Yeah. So the prevailing theory with hypertrophy is a force velocity relationship, so that the muscle fibers produce more force when they're able to shorten slowly compared to when they shorten quickly. Mm-hmm. So this is why particularly bodybuilders or people even in hypertrophy phase will have like certain tempos for their lifts. So like 2-second eccentric, and 2-second concentric contractions.
So it's like bicep curl up, up, up.
Yeah.
Down, down, down.
Exactly. Yeah. And so this is why if you look at athletes who are like explosive power, like Olympic weightlifters, mm-hmm. they tend to not have as much muscle size as powerlifters. Powerlifters, we tend to do things a little slower.
Yes, you do. Sorry.
Both.
I had to.
What? I'm both. Don't be giving me shit.
That's what I'm here for. Well, it's a math equation, right? Force equals mass times acceleration.
Yes.
You take the mass of your muscle, times it by the acceleration. If the acceleration is a big number, it's going to equal more force.
Right.
If it's a smaller number, it's going to equal less force. Semicolon, however, comma, some analyses suggest that muscle size and strength don't necessarily always have a positive correlation.
Right.
Meaning that just because you have big muscles doesn't mean that you're super strong.
Absolutely.
In fact, one study in particular noted that muscle size itself is not a good indicator of overall strength. However, it is important to note that while they don't always correlate, hypertrophy blocks are essential for longevity in lifting, meaning they give your body, specifically your neuromuscular system, a much needed break from heavy strength cycles.
For sure. Sure. I've noticed that since incorporating some hypertrophy work, my body just feels a lot better. I think that I was training at a really
high level for a really long time.
Yeah, and things started to break down a little bit. So hypertrophy, my body feels really good. I don't even know how long my hypertrophy block was. They all just things ran together. I just do what my coach tells me. But definitely muscles grew in size. My joints and everything feel better. And I'm feeling stronger now that I'm in like strength blocks.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's good. It's a good idea. Even though most of us really hate anything that's above 5 reps, it's a good idea just so you don't completely wreck your body in a year.
For sure. Yeah. So speaking of rep ranges.
Tell me about them.
So the rep ranges that have been determined for adequate hypertrophy, it used to be thought like 6 to 12 reps was the ideal rep range for muscle hypertrophy. The American Society of Sports Medicine recommends 8 to 12 reps at about 60 to 70% of your 1 rep max. So that fits in with what we've always thought of the 6 to 12 rep range. Mm-hmm. But it appears that when reps are performed to failure, like we talked about in the beginning, or near failure, like 1 to 2 reps in the tank, you can train in the rep ranges of even like 30 to 40 reps at 30% 1 rep max. with the same gains in hypertrophy as training at 8 to 12 at 80% of your 1 rep max. So that was a landmark study that was published in the Journal of Applied Physiology. And I read that and I was like, that's one, really fascinating. And two, oh my God, 30 to 40 reps.
Right. I just, as you were saying that, I was thinking, oh, no, thanks. I'd rather do 12 reps if there's no difference. It's like, it's the same thing with protein. Like if you get the same amount of benefit from eating, let's say 150 grams of protein versus 180 grams of protein, fuck it. I'm not going to try to eat 180 grams of protein. I'm going to take that extra 30 grams and have candy. Like, if there's no extra benefit, I'm not going to do it. You got to be kidding me.
Yeah. But I think that's really interesting though, because some people do like higher rep ranges. Mm-hmm. And so if you like that and you want to do hypertrophy, 30 to 40 reps at 30% of your 1 rep max, go for it.
If you like to do that, go find our Instagram, go find the post for today's episode, comment below that you like 30 to 40. All 5 of you.
We won't make fun of you. We promise. We love you.
Maybe just put an emoji. Put your favorite emoji in the comments. No one will know what's up unless they listen. And then we'll be like, oh, you guys are the sick ones. I'm just kidding. Listen, if you want to do 30 to 40, I think that it's really important to say that if you're injured and you can't perform 60 to 80%, keep in mind, if you can safely perform this 30 to 40% for the however many reps, like that's very possible.
Absolutely.
You can also incorporate BFR, which we won't get into here, but like there are things you can 100% do if you're injured and you're able to do movements safely, even if it's at lighter weight.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. So just because you're down doesn't mean you have to be out.
For sure. And that one thing we talked about with your injury and on your inability to be able to lift at the loads that you needed to lift at, I think we talked about like just do a hypertrophy cycle, do movements that you can do, get your body strong or potentially stronger, right? We're potentiating that ability to get stronger.
I did get stronger.
And you did. Yeah. And it was awesome. And because instead of just sitting at home and pouting that you can't lift and then.
Or trying to go in and do heavy things and further injure myself.
Right.
I accepted the fact that I'm broken and focused on what I can do rather than what I can't do.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that it's made you a better overall athlete mentally and physically. And
physically. Mentally.
That's to be determined.
We've had a rough week, y'all.
But I attribute like my strength to periods of injury where I did that.
Well, yeah. And I think if I were to speculate, I think my injury definitely came from not having enough, specifically hypertrophy, lower load periods. I think my body just it was a combination of over exaggerating some things on the squat that were poor form. So my squat was like almost good. And then I do something that made it not good, which over time became like an overcompensation. And I was training heavy and hard for a very long time without much hypertrophy or breaks.
Right. You also had some muscle imbalances that needed to be corrected.
Well, I was just a box of a mess. So let's talk about, speaking of injuries and hypertrophy, let's talk about the when and the why of hypertrophy. So hypertrophy is best used away from competition with limited amount of sport-specific movements or practices. So you're not going to be doing lots and lots of squatting. You might do some squatting, some benching, some deadlift, but you're not focusing on those. You're focusing on things that are away from that can help build that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you think of it as a pyramid, if the squat's the pyramid, you want to do everything underneath it, single leg work, lunges, whatever, to build that squat without squatting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily like avoid squatting, but do things that are going to make your squat stronger.
Yeah, you're still going to, in a good hypertrophy block, you're still going to squat because you need to remember that movement pattern, but you're not going to be squatting like excessively. You'll do maybe 3 by 10 and then be done and then do leg specific workouts that's going to help build the squat.
Right. Like some Bulgarian split squats and different things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. In beginner athletes, An increase in muscle size can be observed after 6 to 8 weeks of a true hypertrophy phase. And in strength trained athletes, the changes are a little less obvious. So if you're a beginner and you do hypertrophy 6 to 8 weeks, you're going to see some really big changes. In strength trained athletes, you may not see as big of a change, but that goes back to just letting your body have that neuromuscular break.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, right. Like the people, those of us that have been training years and years and years, we always get kind of the shaft on the, you don't get the newbie gains on anything anymore.
Nothing. But you get the relief of not being in pain.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the hypertrophy phase can last anywhere from 1 to 6 weeks, just depending on how it's built. Although if we're talking about strength training, we would likely not see a 1-week cycle, but we're more likely to see athletes complete 4, 6, 8, or 12-week cycles. And the length of your cycle, of your hypertrophy cycle, can depend on a few different variables. So the first being, when is your next competition? If you're more than 12 weeks out, so let's say you're 16 weeks out or 20 weeks out, that would be an ideal time to do like a 12-week cycle. If you're 12 weeks out, you might want to do like a 6-week hypertrophy cycle.
Yeah, you need to have a peaking period, because you don't want to be doing hypertrophy all the way up until your meet. That's not going to be beneficial.
Right. You need to have at least a couple weeks, and by a couple I mean like ideally 6 to 8, of you getting your body used to really heavy loads. It's getting under those loads and at least feeling them. Especially for women, they say that it's not necessarily that our muscles need to be training at these really high levels. It's that our neuromuscular system needs to be adapting to these heavy loads, so that way when we get under these heavy loads, we're like, okay, this is heavy, but I can do this. Your CNS isn't so like, ah!
Yeah, I read some really compelling research on the fact that women's strength gains are a way higher percentage neurological adaptations than they are for men.
Yeah.
So for women, it's really the neuro input where we get our strength gains. And so that's definitely been true for me. Like getting under heavy loads frequently is when I get the strongest. Obviously, you can't do that. You can't be training at 85% and higher day in and day out for weeks and years on end. So this is where hypertrophy is really beneficial.
But if you are close to a competition, if you're, I would say 6 weeks away, do not start a hypertrophy block.
Yeah.
Just wait. Hopefully you have a coach who has you in some type of strength block or a peaking program. So the next thing that it depends on is how long have you been strength training? So will a 12-week cycle be better for you, or would you be better off with a 6-week hypertrophy cycle followed by a 6-week strength cycle? So this goes back to, are you more of a beginner athlete or are you more of a strength trained? If you're more of a strength trained athlete, you'd be better off doing 6 weeks of hypertrophy and then 6 weeks of some type of strength cycle, because all you really need is the break and to kind of work on some imbalances. But if you're brand new, start by working on your imbalances, start by getting your form right, take that 12 weeks to really hone in on your newfound abilities, and then move yourself into a strength cycle.
Yeah, I like to think of it as like priming your muscles for a strength cycle. And so the more that you've trained, the more that you've done big strength cycles, the less you need to kind of prime your muscles for that. But if you're new, you really need to get that like mind muscle connection going and get your body ready. Yeah.
So, third thing is, are you injured? So if you're injured, as we said, hypertrophy cycles are fabulous if you're injured. For me, I literally couldn't squat for 8 weeks? Something like that. I just couldn't hit below parallel. So there was no point in me trying. So I did every single leg thing I could think of. I did RDLs, but I was doing bench and I was doing deadlifts because I could and it didn't cause me pain. And I was doing them at high rep ranges. I was doing hypertrophy cycles. And so it really worked on a lot of my imbalances. And when I came back, I was able to snatch push press 5 kilos more than I could have ever snatched push press before. And that was simply because I worked on things I didn't want to do. Like I told Kristen, I think when I started, I was like, I don't want to do this, but I don't want to not be in the gym doing something.
Right.
So if your motivation, if you hate high rep ranges, just think, at least I'm doing something.
For sure. And I will attest to the fact that you hated it. You hated it.
Hated it.
She was
such a baby.
You were really pouty and pissy about it for a while until you started to see what it was doing for your body. And now I think you're really happy you did it, right?
Yeah. Well, and it came with a little bit of a mindset shift. It was like, I can either pout about this and not have any structure, or I can shut up. I can write myself a program, which is what the program that you guys have, the 10-week cycles, what I wrote for myself, minus the squats, because I couldn't squat. I did some leg press if I could. But I sat down and I wrote myself a program. And after that, it was like, okay, at least we have a plan. At least we can do something. But yeah, it was horrible. I have like imposter syndrome. I feel like if I'm not lifting heavy, it's a big mental problem that I'm working through with my coach currently. Yeah, anyway, let's not talk about Mary anymore.
But okay, so the point is you did it, and now I think you would not hesitate to do it again in the future.
Absolutely. In fact, I've been thinking about how can I continue to incorporate some of these things as I'm now switching back into Olympic lifting, as I'm getting my feet back in the water. So that brings us to a question we got on Patreon. One of our patrons asked, what are our thoughts on incorporating hypertrophy sets on accessories while focusing on lower rep sets for the big lift? So mixing a hypertrophy and a strength cycle.
Yeah.
That's what you do.
Yeah, that's what you should do. That's exactly what you should do. That's exactly
what you should do. As you are in a strength cycle, you still should be working on things that are imbalanced or things that are your weaknesses through that hypertrophy, so you can still build strength potential as you are doing a strength cycle, but you're doing it in rep ranges and at weights that aren't going to be completely damaging to your strength cycle.
Absolutely. I could not have said that better. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Well, so let's talk a little bit about like the frequency of training each muscle group, because that's important too. The frequency at which you train those muscles is important for them to respond in a manner that creates hypertrophy. So the most research shows that they should be trained at least twice a week to maximize muscle growth.
Which makes sense.
For sure.
But there wasn't really a difference between 2 and 3, right?
Right. So if you want to train a muscle group 3 times a week, go for it.
You must love that muscle group.
Yeah. I just really love doing bicep curls. I'm just going to do them 3 times a week.
Yeah, or abs. People are always like, I have an ab day. And I am always like, what's an ab day?
I know. I just have ab work like every day.
Yeah. What is an ab day? You just do crunches for an ab? I'm sorry. If you have an ab day, you can have an ab day. That makes me want to puke. Personally.
Well, so the American College of Sports Medicine has a position stand on the progression models in resistance training for healthy adults. And I think it's really interesting because they break it down for novice lifters, intermediate lifters, and advanced lifters. And so these are the kinds of questions that we get all the time from you guys.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the difference between, hey, I'm just starting out, what should I be doing? Or, hey, I've been doing this a long time, what should I be doing? So if you have no experience with resistance training, or you've not done it for several years, or when I say like no experience, maybe a couple months, so like you're brand new.
Yeah.
It's recommended that the loads correspond to a repetition range that's in the 8 to 12 rep max, and that you train 2 to 3 days a week for novice lifters. If you're an intermediate to advanced lifter, you would want to, so an intermediate lifter, they define it as someone who's got 6 months of consistent resistance training experience. An advanced lifter is an individual with years of resistance training experience. So it's recommended then that you can use a wider loading range, somewhere between 1 rep max and 12 rep max, in a periodized fashion.
Yeah.
With emphasis on heavy loading in the 1 to 6 rep max range, and using 3 to 5 minute rests, like we talked about in the beginning.
Rests.
Yep. And so for intermediate lifters, the recommendation was training 3 to 4 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And for advanced lifters, it was 4 to 5 days a week.
Now, is this because they didn't see any added benefit of adding an extra day in for beginner lifters?
I think it was to give them more rest and their body more time to recover. Yep.
That makes sense.
Yep. Just like running, right? Like if you're new to running, you're not going to go run every day. Whereas someone who has run multiple marathons might be able to handle running 5 to 6 days a week. But if you're new to it, you're not going to be able to do that. Your body is going to
freak out.
And you're going to break down your tendons and ligaments like so much faster than they can actually build back up. You have to work up to it.
That's what I did. I love that I chose running and I don't run. It's like, here's a running example. I don't do it.
I know. Neither do I.
Ugh, I hate
if someone's chasing me, I'll run.
I ran after my cat after she ran out of the house. I was surprised how fast I could go. I think that's the fight or flight. I was like, oh no, come back, you dum-dum.
Right.
Yeah. So that's hypertrophy in a nutshell. It's beneficial. Keep in mind when you're competing. So if you are competing, I would say more than 8 weeks out, you probably don't really want to hit a hypertrophy cycle at 8 weeks out. If you are competing 12 weeks, that's almost perfect. You can do 6 weeks and 6 weeks, just depending on if you're an intermediate or a beginner. And that just is a testament to how long you've been lifting. If you have a coach who knows you, and if you have a coach at all.
Right.
Right.
And if you don't have a coach and want a good cycle to follow, like Mary said, we've got a free 10-week cycle on our new website, femalestrengthacademy.com.
Yep. And it's something I wrote for myself, so I know that it works. I tweaked it a little because there were some stupid things that I did in there. Like, I took out some things.
This is how we learn. We use our bodies as experiments and then tell you guys what to do or what not to do.
Yeah. I never put an athlete through something I wouldn't A, do myself, or B, haven't tested or haven't had like a really good contact with someone who has tested it, because I just don't want to throw out a program and have someone get injured because I did too much too soon. So just keep that in mind. Also, so there has been some questions as to whether or not I'm going to be writing or we're going to have any type of powerlifting program. The answer is yes.
Woohoo!
But as I just said, I don't want to put anyone through anything that I haven't done or haven't had some direct contact with someone who's gone through it. So I am going to open up about 10 slots for people to come in and test out this powerlifting program.
Sweet.
I'm tentatively starting it. I'm going to start it middle of May. So I will take on 10 people. It's not going to be free, but I was taking mid-May, and it'll be approximately a 12-week cycle. So if you're interested, please email us at femalestrengthacademy@gmail.com. Please don't DM us about this. Send us an email if you are interested. If you have a competition that's in 6 weeks, I cannot accommodate that. I need you to be able to commit to 12 weeks. If you have a competition at the end of the 12 weeks, we can work with that. If you have a competition in the middle, I am not comfortable helping you through that while trying to build this one specific program. So 10 slots, shoot us an email if you're interested, and I will send you a questionnaire. Cool?
Perfect.
All
so
right.
Basically, we need some guinea pigs.
We need some willing guinea pigs. If you have a coach already, you're out. Don't come to me. If you already have a coach, you have a coach, stick with your coach.
Right.
This is for someone who doesn't have a coach, who's been maybe following an online program, who's interested in doing some more specific powerlifting programming type stuff.
For sure.
Faux show. So that is it for this episode. Thank you, ladies, so much for tuning in. We are always loving the suggestions for episodes. If you have any, please make sure that you let us know via DMs or on our Facebook group page, Female Strength Academy, where we do live Q&A sessions every week. And if your question is more in depth than what we're what we're anticipating, it becomes an episode.
There you go. That's right. That's how we get a lot of our ideas. Also, please make sure if you follow us on Instagram, if you've been following us for a while, you notice that our Instagram name changed to Female Strength Academy. That's our parent company for the podcast now. Female Strength Academy is empowered by Iron. It's us.
We're the same people.
We're the same people. Just we expanded and are more than a podcast now. But that means that our Instagram podcast page is really sad. So go follow Empowered by Iron on Instagram and give us some love over there.
Yep. And with that, I think that's it.
All right. We'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.